Hey y'all, today we're going to do notes on neuromuscular junction, which is really the connection between a neuron and a muscle fiber. Okay, if we go back to the tissue unit, we talked about the nervous system or nervous tissue having two parts. We had neurons, which were nerve cells, and we had neuroglia, which were the supporting cells. And then we talked last week about the muscular system and specifically skeletal muscles and how those muscle cells were also called muscle fibers. Well, the two cells, either a nerve cell and a muscle cell, they have to communicate with one another because that nerve cell has to tell or talk to the muscle cell to tell it to contract. Back at the beginning of the year, we did the reflex arc. And a stimulus was detected by a receptor, and then that receptor sent an afferent message to the brain or spinal cord, and then the brain or spinal cord sent an efferent message to an effector. We are on the efferent side of that reflex arc right now. The efferent message is going to be sent by these motor neurons that you see here, which look like little strings that end in these enlarged pieces here. And that efferent message is sent by an efferent neuron to talk to these muscle fibers that you see in red or dark red here on the screen. And so what we're going to look at now is just the connection between those two and what that means. And then tomorrow we'll talk about how does it actually happen. How do muscles contract on a very, very small scale? So let's look at definitions first. Again, we are looking at a motor neuron. Motor means movement, and efferent means that we are on the efferent side of the reflex arc. We are going towards an effector. A motor neuron is going to be connected to each muscle fiber. And that seems like a lot, but if a motor neuron is not connected to a muscle fiber, then it can't get a message to contract. There's no way that it can be told to contract. So, again, each muscle fiber has a motor neuron which is stimulating it. The connection between those two is called a neuromuscular junction or a myoneural junction. I tend to say neuromuscular junction is the connection between a neuron and a muscle, but myoneural is also used sometimes, and it's just the words flip-flop. Myo means muscle and neural means neuron in this situation. So that motor neuron is going to branch, and then it's going to branch off into these smaller pieces. And where that motor neuron connects to the muscle fiber underneath is the specific neuromuscular junction. And the area of sarcolemma where that motor neuron attaches is called the motor end plate. That motor neuron doesn't connect across the whole muscle fiber. It's only going to connect at certain areas. And so where those specific spots are called the motor end plate. Again, it's just an area of sarcolemma. Remember that the sarcolemma is the cell membrane of a muscle cell, and that sarcolemma is cell membrane. It's got all kinds of proteins in it. It's going to allow passageway of ions. It's going to be semi-permeable. And so where that connection is found between the motor neuron and the sarcolemma, or specifically the motor neuron and the motor end plate, the reason that it's important is because at the motor end plate, there are going to be receptors. There are going to be chemical receptors there that are only found where these two things connect. Synaptic knobs are like knobs on a drawer. They are enlarged areas of the motor neuron. So if you look up here in this top picture, or really we can look at the bottom picture, the motor neuron fiber is going to come down here and then it's going to get bigger. Okay, that enlargement at the end of the motor neuron, where it's coming in contact with the muscle fiber, is called a synaptic knob. And inside that synaptic knob, there are synaptic vesicles, which have specific neurotransmitters in them. Neurotransmitters serve as neuron messengers, okay, or chemical messengers that are going to allow a muscle to contract, or they're going to stimulate the muscle to contract. We're going to draw it out in a few minutes, and I think it'll make a little bit more sense than just the definitions. All right, so what has to happen is that a nerve impulse from the brain or spinal cord has to be sent, and it's going to be sent down that motor neuron. And when the message reaches the end of the motor neuron, it is like a lightning bolt. Okay, it is voltage, and that voltage is going to open calcium gates. And when calcium gates open, specifically these are calcium voltage gated channels, when those open, calcium rushes in because it is going from an area of high concentration outside the synaptic knob to inside. When that calcium gets inside the synaptic knob, it is going to cause the synaptic vesicles, which are found in this synaptic knob, these little dots that you see here, or the dots that you see up on that top picture, it is going to cause those to move to the end of that synaptic knob. When they move to the synaptic knob, the end of it, their membranes will fuse and they will release that neurotransmitter that's inside by exocytosis. It literally spits it out. Inside that synaptic vesicle, there is an important neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is kind of the main player. It's a big deal when it comes to muscle contraction. It is going to stimulate that muscle to contract. It's going to kind of kickstart the rest of the process. That neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, is going to bind to receptors on the motor end plate. That motor end plate is a specialized region on the sarcolemma where the two things connect, where the motor neuron connects to the muscle fiber. That acetylcholine binds, and it is going to change the red light from red to green. It is going to stimulate that muscle fiber to contract. It won't contract yet. Okay, there's got to be a couple other things that happen inside the muscle fiber, but again, the light is turned green. We just got to put our foot on the gas pedal from here on out. So that stimulation, again, is just signaling the muscle to contract, not necessarily causing it to fully contract. All right, the next thing we're going to do is draw this together. So if you'll take out, I think we need 7 colors, if I remember right, 6 or 7 colors, and a piece of notebook paper if you think you're going to draw it big, or you can use the top part of the note sheet on the back to draw this if you think you can fit it in that space. All right, y'all, so we're going to draw this neuromuscular junction, and I think it'll make more sense. Let me get my document camera up and going. Come on. All right, here we go. So to draw the neuromuscular junction, the first thing that I'll show you is this picture here so you kind of know what to expect. If you want to get a piece of notebook paper, you can, or computer paper or something, but if you draw small enough, you'll be able to squeeze it up on the top of your paper. All right, so let's start with the actual motor neuron. So I'm going to draw in my motor neuron like this, and it's enlarged at the bottom. Okay, so this skinnier part up here at the top is the motor neuron. And that motor neuron has an enlarged ending, kind of like a drawer knob or a knob on a door, that is called your synaptic knob. So again, this is just kind of the anatomy of the motor neuron. And an impulse is going to travel down this motor neuron. And that impulse is an efferent message that's coming from your brain that says, okay, we want the muscle to contract. And at the end of this motor neuron, there's going to be synaptic vesicles. And so I'm going to change my color here and draw in some synaptic vesicles. And I'm going to go ahead and draw one that's fused to the bottom of this synaptic knob. And each one of these blue circles is a synaptic vesicle. Okay, and inside that synaptic vesicle, you're going to have neurotransmitter. Okay, and the neurotransmitter that we are going to focus on for muscle contraction is acetylcholine. So these red dots, we'll just put a little key over here, is a neurotransmitter, which is specifically acetylcholine in this situation. Okay, and we change the neurotransmitter if we want to change it from muscle contraction to neuron-neuron communication, or a neuron talking to a gland or something like that. All right, so those synaptic vesicles are going to remain in the bottom of the synaptic knob unless they get a signal to move. And the way that they get the signal is calcium. Okay, but the way that calcium is going to rush in is by an impulse. So situated around this synaptic knob, there's going to be calcium voltage gated channels. Okay, so I'm going to take an orange here, and I'm just going to put in a little channel. Okay, and that channel is going to allow calcium to move in. Okay, so the orange here is a calcium voltage gated channel. And all that means is that the door of this gate is closed unless it gets a signal to open. Okay, and the way that a voltage gated channel opens is by a voltage change, meaning like electricity or a lightning bolt zooming down this motor neuron. So the impulse comes and travels down until it reaches these calcium gates. When it reaches calcium voltage gated channels, calcium rushes into the synaptic knob. That will cause the synaptic vesicles to move. And when they move, they are going to fuse to the end of the synaptic knob. They still have acetylcholine in them. Nothing's changed yet. They have not released their acetylcholine. Well, this is only part of the story. This is the motor neuron. It's got to connect to a muscle fiber down below. And so I'm going to draw a muscle fiber. Let me get a different color here. And this muscle fiber is going to be wrapped in endomysium and sarcolemma. And so I'm going to draw my sarcolemma, and we'll draw my muscle fiber. Okay, and this muscle fiber is cylindrical. It has holes in it. Okay, and those holes are T-tubules. Okay, so last week we talked about terminal cisternae, and we talked about T-tubules and the combination of two terminal cisternae and a T-tubule would create a triad. All right, y'all, sorry, I got distracted. Somebody came in my room. So let me just go right back over what we did right here with this purple. So we've drawn most of the synaptic knob up here at the top, but down here, this is going to represent our muscle fiber, and the whole thing is a neuromuscular junction, which is the connection between this motor neuron and the muscle fiber. Now, the muscle fiber is surrounded in sarcolemma. Okay, so my purple is sarcolemma, and it's going to dip down every once in a while and create these holes. Those holes are called T-tubules. Okay, remember, tubule is just baby tube. Those T-tubules are going to be really important with the spread of a muscle impulse, or telling the muscle that instead of us just contracting right here where the motor neuron is, we have to contract along the whole muscle fiber. And so the sarcolemma has the ability to spread that impulse because of these T-tubules. All right, now the specific area of the sarcolemma where the synaptic knob connects to the sarcolemma is called the motor end plate. Okay, so the motor end plate, again, is this specialized section of the sarcolemma where the motor neuron connects to the sarcolemma. There's no motor neuron over here, so that's not the motor end plate. That's just plain old sarcolemma. There's a specific area called the motor end plate that is different because it contains receptors. And the receptors are going to be located on the motor end plate. And those receptors are complementary to acetylcholine. Okay, and those are called ligand gated sodium channels. Okay, what does that mean? Ligand-gated channels are different from voltage-gated channels. Voltage-gated channels open when an impulse reaches them. Ligand-gated channels open when something binds to it. So acetylcholine, which is up here in my synaptic vesicle, is going to be released into this space, and it's going to bind to the ligand-gated sodium channels. Acetylcholine is released by exocytosis. The synaptic vesicle spits it out. It's going to diffuse across this space. The name for this space is the synaptic cleft. The synaptic cleft is the space between the motor neuron and the motor end plate. Okay, they don't touch one another. They're very close, but they do not connect and they do not touch. Synaptic vesicles are going to release the acetylcholine into the space or into the synaptic cleft. It's going to diffuse and bind to ligand-gated sodium channels. Sodium's already there. It naturally exists in your body. So it's just hanging out in this cleft as well. And when the acetylcholine binds to that sodium ligand-gated channel, sodium rushes in. And when sodium rushes in, we are going to stimulate the muscle to contract. So sodium rushes in and stimulates the muscle to contract. Now notice, I did not write sodium rushes in and muscle contracts. We are a long way away from a muscle contraction. This is 4 steps out of about 13, okay? So we have not fully contracted. We have only given this muscle fiber the green light. Okay, we have only converted the muscle fiber to the green light. We have not put our foot on the gas pedal yet. We have not pressed the gas pedal. Maybe our foot's there, but we have not pressed the gas pedal yet. Okay, I'm going to go back through everything one more time from start to finish on the neuromuscular junction. And then we've got one more slide to do on the other page. Okay, so entire thing is neuromuscular junction, the connection between a neuron and a muscle cell. Nerve cell, muscle cell. I'm not talking about my whole bicep. I'm talking about the cells that make up the bicep. Impulse travels down the motor neuron. That's going to cause calcium voltage-gated channels to open. They're voltage-gated because when you zap them with the ionic change or when you zap them with the impulse, they're going to open. When they open, calcium rushes in. That causes the synaptic vesicles to move to the end of the synaptic knob. When they move to the end of the synaptic knob, they release their acetylcholine by exocytosis. Acetylcholine diffuses across the synaptic cleft or space and binds to sodium ligand-gated channels. When it binds, the door opens. That allows sodium to rush in, and a huge influx of sodium will stimulate the muscle to contract. That just causes the green light of contraction. Later, we'll see that that stimulation is localized to the motor end plate. Somehow, we've got to get it across the whole sarcolemma. Okay, which will be the notes for tomorrow. All right, so let me back up here and go to that last slide that we have on motor units. Okay, a motor unit is different than a motor neuron. Okay, a motor unit, it is a unit. It is more than one thing. A motor unit is one motor neuron and every single muscle fiber that it controls. Now, it may be that one motor neuron is going to control just a few muscle fibers, okay? Or it could be big motor units that control many muscle fibers. Generally speaking, The bigger the muscle, the bigger the motor neuron, therefore the bigger the motor unit. Okay, if you look at the gluteus maximus versus the motor neurons that control your hands, gluteus maximus is a bigger muscle, therefore it has more muscle fibers, therefore it has more motor neurons, therefore it has more motor units. Okay, so you can think the bigger the muscle, the more the motor units. And we'll do a little bit more with motor units when we talk about recruitment later on in the unit, when we try to figure out how much contraction can we really get out of a muscle. All right, so you have 2 review sheets to do on the neuromuscular junction, which are going to go over what I just did. And then you have 1 sheet on anabolic steroid reading. You will upload both of those to It's Learning. Okay, when you go to It's Learning, it should look like this. Okay, under Anatomy and Physiology Honors, you're going to click on Resources. You're going to click on Neuromuscular Junction Review for homework. Please notice on the side of the screen that the deadline for this is tomorrow night at midnight, okay, on 3/17. It says, upload a picture of your 2 review sheets for the neuromuscular junction. Make sure to check if there's a back. If you have no idea what 2 sheets I'm talking about because your packet is disorganized, you click on this PDF, and here is sheet number 1. It has a back. Same thing with number 2, but I don't believe it has a back. Yes, it does, just kidding. Okay, and you will try it. Okay, see if you can figure out how to do the neuromuscular labeling, and then upload a picture of the assignment. When you go to upload a picture, it says add files. From what I can tell, it is easier to do this if you have the It's Learning app, because you can upload a picture directly from your camera roll instead of emailing it to yourself, saving it to your computer, putting it in here, and you get my gist. Okay, so download the app, and you'll do the same thing with the anabolic steroid reading questions. You have the article, you have the questions, answer those, take a picture of it, and upload it, and I will grade those as well. After the deadline, I will upload the key to the review sheet so you can kind of stay on track and make sure that you're getting the answers right. Again, I will let you know by remind when I have assigned a quiz or a test. I've just got to figure all that out through It's Learning. So give me a little bit of time. And y'all, I just ask that you be patient through all of this because I'm working as hard as I can. I know y'all are working as hard as you can. We are doing our best to make it through the e-learning. So just be patient. And if you have questions, send me a message on Remind, and I'll get back with you as quick as I can.